Endwalker's lore. Oh my god, I got a bit of a headache about this one. If I were to summarize what I think my problem is with it, is that I feel that Final Fantasy XIV's Endwalker expansion, like, first of all, I'm a lore obsessive. I really, I quit playing Final Fantasy during the high point in Shadowbringers, which was awesome as far as the lore was concerned. I mean, well done as fuck. I was just stunned at how good the what a shitty conclusion to that, and everything, up from such a high down to this, you know, and everything. And so I think that my disagreement with the Japanese writer about this whole thing, and the guys writing the plot, Square Enix themselves were basically quoted as saying that that they felt that if they dragged the lore out for too long, it would cause issues basically and everything, and they didn't want to drag it out any longer. But see, the moment that somebody makes the decision about to take a lore, very very quickly to its conclusion, you get bad writing 101 that ends up, getting hit. Now, see, the thing is about all this, if you want like some of my takes on like really big media that's come out, recently and everything, and like it's just an example of my opinions, Cersei blows up the set. This is just an example of a scene that took place in Game of Thrones season 6.
The longer you wait, the worse it'll be for you. What are you doing?
I want you to know that I really don't like this scene. I mean, this part is kind of fascinating, this initial part, but how it ends in the end is just terrible. Bad writing completely. Just awful. Now, this scene may do like really well for being like a cinematic scene where something big happens and everything. And it may be like really awesome in the sense that, you get this big dramatic about it, but it's bad writing because it's rushed. I mean, if you think about how many plot threads were killed here and everything, and how Cersei gets out of a very difficult situation in one fell swoop here, and everything, and totally undoes her problems and everything in this, version of Deus Ex Machina that benefits the of the story. This is just incredibly shitty. She should have had. This makes it so easy for her to overcome all of this, and that's what makes it so terrible. And then on top of everything else, after this happens, what is the reaction from the small folk and everybody else in Westeros and everything after the Great Sept has been blown up? Now, this would be seen as a massive, atrocity that had been committed by the crown and would have turned a lot of the common folk against the crown and everything, and it caused a lot of people to become resistant to it and resent it even and everything about who's on the throne at that point. And there would be reaction. There would be, the crown would be demonized in most of Westeros for what it did and everything, but it doesn't. Nobody even reacts. Nobody even begins to react after this. After the Better Queen is slaughtered. You would think they could just kill Marjorie Tyrell and nobody's gonna give a shit other than Tommen.
There's something wrong.
You have nothing to fear, Your Grace. The trial will begin shortly.
Cersei is not here. Tommen is not here. Why do you think they are not here?
If the accused is not here, she will be tried regardless. We cannot escape the justice of the gods.
Forget about the bloody gods and listen to what I'm telling you. Cersei understands the consequences of her absence, and she is absent anyway, which means she does not intend to suffer those consequences. can't wait. We all need to leave. We all need to leave now. Loris, stay with me. Let me through. Let me through. Get out of my way. Let us through.
Awesome from the cinematic standpoint, of destruction and everything. Great visuals, terrible story writing, just awful. Awful. And then on top of all this, the smug look on her face, and nobody gives a shit that the sept got blown up. She gets out of the corner that she backed herself in. She get the Deus Ex Machina, and the whole lore gets to rush towards the conclusion of the whole thing. This is terrible writing 101 right here. What happens? It's just awful. This is bad writing, and this lore went to shit Captain America got taken off the moment that his influence no longer mattered and Dan just started making shit up, and everything. The lore started to go all the way downhill and everything, and kind of shit is why I'm mad at George R. R. Martin for not, finishing the fucking books. Yet another project with this new shit, that he's focused on and everything. Now, I care about that stuff too. I just want him to finish the fucking books, It's you can focus on all that when they're done, is the way that I would wish that he would do things. But, like, he is now fabulously wealthy beyond measure, and so he doesn't have to give a shit what any of us think anymore, and everything. And so, yeah, I'm upset with him, you know. Anyways, this was just terrible writing in a nutshell because Cersei had backed herself in a corner and she gets out of it so incredibly easily with a very convenient solution and everything. And it's just you can really feel it, and I think that's part of where the season 7 way downhill. Is that they decided that they had to wrap this shit up to get it to its conclusion as quickly as possible, and they didn't know how to do it, so they started just tearing the universe apart and making everything rush towards the end, and the Lord only just went downhill and ended up jumping the shark. I mean, I'm not gonna I'm gonna be with everybody and everything, and saying that I'm impressed at the awesome, cinema. It does make a great, scene for the special effects and everything that are happening, and it's awesome in that respect. But if you start to think deeper than just the visuals about what happened here and everything, and you think about more than that and what this means for the story and everything, like this is just like terrible writing. And then, factor in on top of everything else that, like I said, there's no reaction. There's no swift condemnation of the crown. There's no backlash against Cersei for blowing up the Sept of Baelor and everything, like the Great Sept and everything like that. That's just not, that George R. R. Martin had spent all this time building up realism in his stories and everything, and making it, a little bit of fantasy mixed in with a lot of realism in his story was kind of like the idea. He wanted to make the universe resemble the dystopian nature and the terrible nature of medieval times and how awful life was back then, instead of trying to sugarcoat it and romanticize, medieval culture and the way that things were back then. He wanted to reflect the darkness of the actual dark ages in his medieval fantasy story. And so, to do this and everything, and to have, the great religion, and its great church literally blown up by wildfire, and nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. No, Cersei doesn't suffer any additional backlash for doing it. It's ridiculous. It's a bunch of nonsense, and you can tell that, the rushing towards to resolve all the plot threads began way back in season six. And everything, and that's when the quality really started to take a nosedive with, respect to Game of Thrones. Was, the point in which, Dan and Dan decided they no longer gave a shit, and so they wanted to get to the conclusion as quickly as possible.